let's go to the Big 12. Oklahoma, we know, is loaded. Texas, we know, is loaded. Can anybody challenge those two?
I think it's going to be just like last year. You've got Oklahoma State that's right there, and they're at the same spot Texas Tech was last year. Remember, I had Texas Tech tied for second in the Big 12 last year, and they, of course, ended up tying for first in the Big 12. And when you look at Oklahoma State, they've got a quarterback in Zach Robinson, who's a veteran senior QB. This is his third year as a starter. They have two All-Americans. They have Kendall Hunter at running back, and they have Des Bryant at receiver. Then they have another All-American in my first-team left tackle, Russell Okung. And once again, if you talk to NFL scouts, he's the number one rated offensive lineman. So this is a very talented offense, one that's capable of putting up big points. And you look at them defensively. If there's a problem with Oklahoma State in recent years, it's been the defense. They've given up 440 and 407 yards per game the last 2 years. Well, they've got a new defense coordinator in Bill Young. Now, Bill Young's one of the best defensive coordinators out there, and he inherits a veteran defensive front seven. Normally, when a defense coordinator takes over a team, he says, well, we're going to have to work hard. We'll see what we do on the field. Bill Young says we're going to be a very, very good defense. So I'm going to take his word for it. They've got a good defense. I like the talent. I like the defense coordinator. They've got good special teams. And then you look at their schedule. There's only 3 games I question on their schedule this year. They've got Georgia out of the box. But luckily, Georgia's got an inexperienced quarterback in Joe Cox. They lose Moreno at the running back spot, so it's a good situation to catch Georgia in. They play Texas at home, which last year they went into Texas when Texas was ranked number 1. They lost by 4 points, and they had the ball. Had the ball at the end of the game.
I saw that game.
So it could be just like the Texas Tech scenario last year, where Oklahoma State beats Texas in that game and is undefeated when their season final is at Oklahoma. I don't think they're going to be able to beat Oklahoma on the road, but we could see a 3-team race once again this year. Now, Texas and Oklahoma, you're looking at 2 national title contenders here. These are
Texas Tech get depleted?
Not really, but they don't have as favorable a schedule as they did last year. And they do lose their quarterback, but Mike Leach, his new quarterback's only going to throw for 375 yards per game this year in that system. I think Texas Tech drops to 3 or 4 losses this year, especially with the strength of the Big 3. But as far as Texas and Oklahoma go, if Texas has, there are 2 weaknesses this year that I see. One is out of the running back spot. Their leading rusher last year, Vondrell McGee, only rushed for 397 yards. That's not very good out of a leading rusher. And they lose 3 stars along the defensive line, including Arapko. But I still rate their defensive line number 17. Expect better play out of the running back position. And this was a team that last year I thought might have been a year away from contending for the national title, but they got there last year, and I think they're capable again this year. Now, Oklahoma, I was shocked when Sam Bradford turned down the NFL. He would have been the first overall pick. It surprised me. How about Jermaine Gresham? He would have been the first tight end picked in the draft. And then McCoy, their defense tackle, would have been one of the top defensive linemen.
Bradford doing what he was like Leonard.
Yeah, very surprising because you're not going to improve upon number 1 overall.
Leonard's stock went down the following year.
It sure did.
He should have jumped the year before.
Yeah, he lost a lot. Now, maybe Bradford wants a national title, and there's something to be said for that. What has Leinart done in the NFL? He's a backup to Kurt Warner right now with Arizona, and how many times do you win the national title?
Doing a lot of hot tubs.
Yeah. But, when you look at Oklahoma, I think the main concern you have with them is the offensive line. They had the best offensive line in college football last year. They lose 4 superstar offensive linemen this year. And that's tough to replace. If you don't have a strong line of scrimmage, it's going to be tough, even with a pair of 1,000-yard backs in the backfield, even with Bradford. But 2006, they had to replace 4 offensive linemen. They actually improved their yards per carry from 4.1 to 4.5, decreased the sacks by 7, and they scored more points per game. Now, they can't score more points than they did last year. Last year, they averaged 51 points per game. But if they come within 80% of that, they're going to have a very, very good team. In fact, they've got my number 3 defense in the country. The reason I gave the slightest of edges to Texas over Oklahoma is the schedule. I mentioned Texas has 2 games that are going to be tough this year. Their other 4 road games are Wyoming, Baylor, Texas A&M, and Missouri. Missouri's in a rebuilding year this year. Their other 3 teams all had losing records. It's Oklahoma State and Oklahoma is really the only 2 questions with Texas. Oklahoma's schedule, they open up with BYU, which is my favorite to win the Mountain West. They play that Miami of Florida game in the heat of Florida. They play Texas in Dallas. And then they play 3 solid bowl-caliber teams in Nebraska, Kansas, and Texas Tech, all on the road. And the thing about Texas Tech, in Lubbock this decade, they are 47-10. It's an unusual, out-of-the-way location, and they are tough. You look at those 6 games, you got to feel maybe they slip up once somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I was flipping.
Bradford or no Bradford.
Yeah, I'm flipping coins. And
so you give a slight edge to Texas. With Missouri rebuilding, who do you like in the North? Is Nebraska ever going to regain their old status?
I've got Nebraska winning the North this year, but the North is not overwhelming. It could be any one of teams. Kansas is going to be the preseason Big 12 favorite in the North this year because they said when people look at teams, they look at quarterback, running back, receivers. If you do that with Kansas, Todd Reesing, a couple of 1,000-yard receivers, you're pretty excited about their offense. I don't like the losses at linebacker, and I hate Kansas' schedule this year. Of the Big 12 North teams, they're the only one that has to play Oklahoma and Texas, so they'll be an underdog in both those games. The other game out of the South, they play Texas Tech on the road in Lubbock. And this decade, Kansas has only won about 25% of their games on the road, so they struggle on the road as it is. In fact, they only have 3 Big 12 home games this year. One of them's Oklahoma, which they're going to be an underdog in. They play Iowa State at home, and they play Nebraska at home. All the other winnable games are on the road, and they've struggled on the road. Believe me, I've caught a lot of flack from Kansas fans this year. They let me know that I picked them lower than everybody else. But I've got Nebraska winning the Big 12 North. I think when you look at them, they do lose their quarterback from last year in Frank Gans. They do lose their starting running back, and they lose their top receiver. But I like the line play, I like the defense and special teams, and they've got the best schedule. So I went with Nebraska winning the North, and then I've got a tie for second, Colorado and Kansas State. And I've got Kansas for the second straight year picked much lower than everybody else at number 4. Remember, last year I had Nebraska ahead of Kansas. Nebraska was coming off a 5-win season. Kansas was coming off a 12-1 season where they finished number 7. Kansas fans let me know at the start of the year, but as it was, Nebraska finished ahead of Kansas in the standings.